So I've been thinking about doing this for a while, and essentially what I want to do is I want to start doing like a weekly video of just reflections from the week and what I'm thinking, and I'm trying not to put too much production value into it. It's really just a kind of stream of consciousness, what's happening. So what kind of brought this on is I've been doing a lot of reflecting lately. So about a year ago, I had an epiphany. Um, I realized that like I just wasn't in control of my own life, and I wasn't on my own path. And when I started talking about different things that I was actually thinking, my family essentially scheduled an intervention. Like they had this intervention for me, wanted me to go into like a week of intensive therapy. Um, so that was an interesting experience. But in the end, like so that kind of started off this whole journey, and turns out all of that was essentially undiagnosed autism and ADHD. And I'm still working on like the formal diagnosis, but it kicked off a stretch of me trying to regain control over my life. And it started out with writing. I used writing as a way to really clarify what I was thinking, and it also really showed me how powerful the internet really is. A month after I started writing, I went viral for probably all the wrong reasons. Ended up getting all sorts. I actually got physical hate mail. I was mentioned on national talk radio. All sorts of just not fun things. So that was a pretty interesting time, right? But along those lines, I actually I had people trying to get me fired, which was very interesting. So they couldn't. I didn't do anything actually wrong, but essentially I pissed a lot of people off because I think I wrote something that hit a little close to home. I essentially wrote this letter to my dad. My dad and I do not see eye to eye politically, and so I wrote this open letter that I think. And I wrote it in such a way that it was intended to get a reaction. I was studying like writing and blogging at the time. I was taking this course on like how to elicit different reactions, and essentially I did that at scale, and it was bad. So after that, I ended up deleting social media because it became this like just absolute cesspool of hate. And I continued writing, and after probably a month and a half, 2 months, I ended up getting back on social media in a more limited fashion, specifically back on Twitter. And, because I saw how powerful Twitter could be, both on the negative and on the positive. But I wanted to change the way I use Twitter, because that was one of the things I realized is that social media really can be as good or as bad as you make it. And the problem with social media is it defaults to being bad. And based on the research I did, there's a lot of reasoning for this, but essentially it boils down to the fact that social media rewards things that happen in the short term versus the long term, and negativity gets eyeballs quickly. And ultimately, that is true. And so I was negative, and I got a lot of views. It was great. I got like 200,000 views in a weekend. It was blowing my mind. But it wasn't the right kind of views. And after that, I really decided that I was only going to try to focus on helping people and being helpful and just being a positive voice online. And I think for the most part I've accomplished that. I really try to stay away from negativity. I curate my following on Twitter to really only focus on people who generally are positive minded. And you know, negative things happen in the world, negative things, you know, people have negative events in their lives. And I'm not saying that I get rid of people for stuff like that. But I can't do the focus on negativity that some people have, which, you know, again, I think that's really a symptom of social media as it stands. So instead, I was really focused on the long-term view of social media. But come November, I ended up having a meeting with like a VP in the company I was working with. And I crafted this idea and tried to get it built up at work. And I came into this meeting and I had this idea and I asked for like a ridiculous amount of money and like funding, and I pretty much it would have never worked. It just wasn't the way anything works. But it was an idea, right? And I came in with this idea, and essentially he told me like, look, we're not doing that. That's not how anything works. But you know, it'll, like, if you build any of this stuff that you've talked about, like, we're going to own it because you work for us and that's how this works. And I was like, wait, what? That's not cool. But then he said something else that really set off a whole chain reaction. And he said, you know, he goes, I come from a startup background. He's like, if you really think you've got something, then go with it. And so I quit the next day. I just walked off. I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm afraid there's going to be this conflict of interest. I had an idea. I was like, I had talked to somebody who, you know, might be interested as an investor. Yeah, turns out completely misread that situation. I was way too early. Had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what it actually took to run a startup. But 2 months later, I formed my first startup with a co-founder that I met online. We had talked briefly and we started this company together. And yeah, again, I knew absolutely nothing about running a startup. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure this out. And one of the first things I did was I entered the GSV Startup Bootcamp. It was their second rendition of it. It's a 7-week boot camp that talks all about like how to pitch your startup and really, you know, a bit about building out the various aspects. A pretty good intro course, right? And so I attended this and I met some people, and I ended up pitching in the competition, and I was selected as part of the top 20. And then, like, it literally went, I pitched, you know, as one of like 80 something startups. I was selected in the top 20, and the next day I got to pitch Tim Draper, who, if you're not familiar, he's a billionaire, and he has this TV show called Meet the Drapers, which is kind of like Shark Tank, but for startups. And so all of a sudden I'm on this Zoom call with Tim Draper, and I blow my pitch. Completely terrible. Maybe 50% of the pitch that I had done the day before. And so I wasn't selected, and that was okay because it was a great experience. But I continued to try to build out my startup, and I ran into failure after failure after failure. Essentially, nothing I wanted to do work. I had this grand vision, but I had no money. I had no network. I had nothing. And so I started trying to like build out, you know, potential products, and I really discovered the creator economy and how all of this was working. And I was doing research into blockchain and various cryptocurrencies, and I could see how it would all work, but I didn't really have enough time or resources to build it. Like, bills kept coming due, and I kept trying to scramble and trying to figure out ways. And so I was trying to like do things like with content, and ultimately nothing worked. And I did all of this in public, by the way. Like, I was tweeting out my journey the entire time, to not very many people, honestly. But my audience was growing, and that was kind of cool. Like, I started to develop relationships with people that I had met along the way. And that was really helpful because there were some really dark times. You know, it's a very rough thing when you have this grand vision of how the world could be and the rest of the world's just not coming along with it. You keep getting these glimmers of hope only to be shot down. Like, I was meeting with all these investors, and trying to just get someone to like buy into the idea to give us the resources to actually start building some of this. And then I thought I had someone who was interested, and it turns out like she wasn't exactly like it wasn't quite the way. Things didn't work out the way I wanted, and so I realized that it was time to shut it down. And so that was about 6 months. So it was from like January is when we incorporated the company. Ended up shutting it down in June. And yeah, like looking back on it, it was never going to work. I've learned so much over the past, year at this point. But the 6 months of that journey was one of the most educational, brutally educational experiences of my life. And so one of the things that I really learned from that was how important it is to have the right co-founder. My co-founder and I were not a good fit. Our communication styles sucked in terms of like working well together. A lot of that is because I'm autistic and I am naturally not gifted at communication. I have communication issues. And I've got ADHD, so I'm all over the place. I need very specific kind of people that can work with me, and I've had that at times in my life. And that if I can work with the right people, I can do some incredible things. And unfortunately, it just ended up like not being a good fit. And I rushed into that co-founder relationship. We didn't even have the same vision. We had two different visions that I was trying to like cram together and make work. And again, see that there's just no way that was ever going to be successful. And I can see that now, right? So, after that, I started kind of really reflecting on what I wanted to do. And one of the other things I had done was gone through the On Deck Course Creator Fellowship. So that was a great program. It really helped me understand a bunch of different aspects in terms of creating online courses and, delivering transformational experiences, which is something that I believe highly in. So that's one of the things that I saw that I really wanted to make possible. I think that anybody in the world should be able to make a living as a content creator. And I really believe that that is the ultimate way to create universal basic income, or universal creator income at least, because not everyone is going to be a creator. And that's something that I'm having a hard time coming to terms with, is the fact that like I see this vision for how things can be possible, but the reality is it's not going to be for everyone no matter what I do, and that's okay. I've come to terms with that. I see the world a certain way. I made a lot of assumptions along the way that were not right, and that's cool. But I started thinking about ways that I could just help on a smaller scale. And so as part of this, I ended up launching my first course. It's called Supercharge Your Time, and we're actually like halfway through the first cohort now. And so I'm actually running like two cohorts. So I've got a test cohort of people that I met in ODCC, which has really just been two wonderful participants mostly. And then I've got a larger group that I actually was able to get some paid signups for. But yeah, it's all about automation principles and how to break down problems so that you can really automate them. And I had an absolutely amazing experience this week in the test group. So at this point, the test group, it was week 3, and I had a woman who was self-proclaimed, like I had students rank themselves on like a scale of 1 to 10 on how comfortable they are with automation, and I think she put around like a 3, right? And one of the things that I had students do this week was, we spent like 5 minutes researching how to connect um, two systems to be able to talk with each other. And it's not like, the idea was just to kind of get an idea of how to do that. And so when I asked her to share what she had researched, she goes, well, actually, I just went ahead and did it because I saw how easy it was to make that connection. And she really started talking about how empowering that was for her, because she was able to see it in a different light. And it was absolutely incredible to help her reach that place. And that's ultimately what I want to be able to do for more people, and to do at scale. And that's something that I've been thinking about various ways to do. How can we accomplish this at scale? And really the first thing is to work with a small group. So I'm curious to see if this kind of transformation can start taking root in some of the other students. But ultimately, I think that's the key. It's becoming so easy to automate our processes that as humans, we should be focused on everywhere we can use automation to not have to worry about the shit that sucks. As someone who is ADHD and autistic, I rely a lot on automation. As a software engineer, a lot of the times, if there were little things getting dropped through the cracks, I would build automated checks around them, so I didn't have to worry about that anymore, because I knew that I would miss stuff like that. And especially from the autism side of it, I can end up getting fairly just burnt out with everything. But with kind of an automated structure in place, some of this stuff can just kind of keep happening without me, and have it ready for me when I'm ready to work on things again. So I think it can be incredibly empowering to really figure out how to work automation into your life. And with all these no-code tools, and you can build no-code websites with Bubble and Webflow, and do all these connections. And then the ones I'm really focusing in on are Zapier, connecting all these systems, because there's all these different parts of our lives, right? All these different parts of our businesses that we're trying to create, and they can all talk to each other, and it's becoming easier and easier. And when you start seeing what's possible, you realize how much time in your life you can save, which means that you have all this extra time to do things that matter, right? Spend time with family, help more clients. You can really start scaling your business, and start supporting more. You could support more employees, or build it out. I mean, whatever you want to do, that's the ultimate thing. It gives you more time, which is more freedom. And ultimately, that's what I really want to share with the world, is this idea that the internet gives us all the ability to regain our freedom. Because I don't want a world in which people are dependent on their situations. I've seen way too many cases where people get trapped because they don't have the money to get out of what they want, of what they're in. They don't have the time to be able to learn new skills to build up more ways to do that. And so automation can really help all of these things happen. And if we can teach people how to automate the various aspects of their lives, then all of a sudden they can take advantage of this extra power. And if you really start to figure out how to solve problems, and figure out how to automate those solutions, then you can solve problems for people at scale, which is incredibly valuable. Because what we're starting to see is this. In the beginning, there was the Facebooks, the Googles, these giant corporations who figured out how to automate these processes at very high scale. And then along with that, they get all this data that they can use to then make all sorts of more money, because money is data, and that's something else that I uncovered, which is for another video. But this, right now we're starting to get into a place where anybody can build up a system that gathers data and uses that data to help solve problems for people. And as an entrepreneur, it's really all about figuring out how to solve problems that people will pay you for. But by being able to have everyone automate stuff, we really get the ability to then start applying these solutions where people aren't paying us, and that's okay too. Unfortunately, money is currently a reality that we have to deal with. I think in the future at some point it won't be. I feel like at some point in the probably very distant future, money just won't be needed anymore, because it won't make a whole lot of sense. But anyway, I digress again here. But yeah, by giving people the ability to automate these aspects, I think we can really make the world a much better place. And one thing that I found on this journey now, it's finally starting to pay off in terms of education. So I have learned, as I said, way more than I told people I learned more in the 6 months of my failed startup than I did in the 6 previous years of working. There's so many different moving pieces that you have to learn in order to accomplish things. And I think that's problematic in a way, because most people, again, I was stupid about it. I took so many risks that I probably shouldn't have. I put myself and my family through way more stress than is probably fair to them. And looking back, I would do things differently. But it's all finally starting to come together for me. So, I've got this course that is now running, and I'm getting some very positive feedback there. I'm building out a SaaS platform, so I ended up deciding to back away from blockchain, because I'm not a blockchain engineer, and that was kind of our last startup. I felt like I could make it happen if I could help bring in all the resources together, and ultimately I couldn't. But now, so I'm building out this SaaS platform, and I've made all of these incredible connections, and that's something that the entrepreneurial community is something special. There are so many people willing to help, and a lot of it is all about knowing what question to ask. Because, if you ask the right question, either people in your network will help you, or they will find people in their network to help you. And that is an incredibly powerful tool to take advantage of. And so when you're building out a company or anything, the networking, and I used to hate the term networking, so we'll go on a little aside here. I didn't understand it. And again, autistic, so human connection can sometimes be rather difficult for me. And so it all felt like a lot of work, and I didn't understand the purpose of it. I thought it was all small talk, and I did it occasionally, but I didn't do it well, because I didn't really know what I was doing, and I sucked at it. And so for a 10-year career, I ended up with no real network, because I just abandoned my job in a fit of I have an idea, and so I didn't really have that network to draw on. And so as I did all this, I started learning about networking, and I started making connections. And ultimately, networking is about knowing people and knowing what they like to do. And when you know people who like to do stuff, and you hear about someone who needs something done, and you say, oh, I know somebody who likes to do that, you connect them. And that makes everybody happy, because it makes you happy to connect people like that who can help each other. It makes the person who needs help happy because they get help. And it makes the person who does the thing happy because they get to do the thing, and that makes them happy. And that's ultimately what networking is. And so, yeah, it's really starting, like, my networking is starting to pay off, and I'm starting to get some opportunities coming by. Actually, I'm getting way too many opportunities right now. I'm getting to the point where I've really got to figure out where I want my life to go from here. So that was one of the things. I felt like I didn't really have choices in my life. I felt like I was being pushed onto this path that other people were dictating for me. And I'm starting to get opportunities, and quite a few of them. And it's going to be hard because I want to do them all. Like, I'm really excited about like 5 or 6 different things right now, and ultimately I'm going to have to probably choose only a couple of those to pursue, but it's not there yet. That's still in the works. But interestingly, I was invited to go through the 3rd edition of the GSV Startup Bootcamp. So you remember however long ago I was talking about that, I got the opportunity to pitch Tim Draper. Well, so for the 3rd edition of the Startup Bootcamp, one of the coaches reached out to me ahead of time and said, "Oh, you should really join us for this next boot camp." And I was like, "Yeah, so actually just shut down my company." And she convinced me to go ahead and come back anyway. And so I had kind of been tossing around this idea, right? I was thinking about how corporate does a few things very well. A lot of corporate life I'm not a fan of, but there are some things that they do very well. And essentially, they provide a lot of support to the people who need it so they can solve the problems that they have, right? And so like when I came in as a software engineer, corporate made sure that I had everything I needed to be a software engineer. Like, that was my job. That was what I was focused on, right? And being in a startup environment is a lot of fun because you get to wear a lot of different hats and you get to do a lot of different things, and that's really exciting for someone with ADHD. But the part that sucks is you don't have that support when you need it. So like, if you need some sort of resource, if you don't have a network, you're kind of screwed. And so I came up with this idea of the Creator Services DAO. So a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. It's essentially a company run on the blockchain. Community with a bank account is another way that I've heard it discussed. But my idea was like, okay, what if we've got all these entrepreneurs doing their own thing, right? And let's say underneath these entrepreneurs, instead of having a corporate layer that provides all this support, what if we just have a DAO? What if we have it's essentially a community underneath that can offer resources as needed? And so I started developing the idea of this Creator Services DAO. And I really haven't built anything formally like this. It's mostly just an idea. But the thinking was that, like, if a startup needs something that another startup can provide, we can kind of go through this DAO layer underneath and make sure that problem gets solved, and so this helps, I think, a lot of entrepreneurs that don't have like a built-in network, because it's essentially a network that captures that. And I think there's a lot of other interesting things you can do too, because I think it allows you to share code more freely. So essentially, instead of either just open sourcing your code or everybody building the same thing, if people have different bits of services that they have built out, because as a startup you build out all sorts of different things that may or may not be right, but a lot of times you're building out something that another startup could use, who's either solving a similar problem or a different problem, but kind of with similar ideas. So the thinking is like, okay, what if we can do all this in a way that can easily reward companies? And the trick of doing this is doing it without access to capital, because capital makes all that easy, right? If you have money, you can pay someone to do the thing you need them to do, and that is great. So if you don't have a network, have money, because money solves a lot of those problems. But yeah, so that's actually where I started really trying to figure out how to tie in like cryptocurrencies, because being programmable money, I think you can do a lot of interesting things with that. And so I've been kind of researching how all that works, and I'm, again, by no means an expert here, but I understand the basic concepts well enough to put the different pieces together, and then I just have to figure out how to actually make that work. But anyway, so I put together the idea of this creator services DAO, and I pitched it a couple weeks ago, and I almost didn't. It was a very busy time in my life. I had all sorts of things going on. I had like the course that I'm teaching starting, and I was like feeling completely unprepared. But then I had a great conversation with someone who I met during this whole journey, and he really, I don't know, he gave me the pep talk I needed. And so I, even though I wasn't really, I didn't feel ready, I went ahead and I pitched this idea. And yeah, I found out today that I was actually selected as part of the top 25. And now I get to pitch Tim Draper again, with this idea that is not much. Like I presented it in such a way that I've got this idea, and it's really just a loose collaboration. Like right now, I'm working with a couple startups, and I'm building a startup. I'm consulting kind of with a startup slash early founding member, but it's unfunded, so it's not really a great like paying position. And then I'm helping some up and coming creators, including the guy that I had a great conversation with. And so, at this point, it's just this free sharing of resources as much as possible, because there's not money to exchange. So it's just all this happening kind of for free, and that's cool. But I think we could do it a little better to where we can start expanding it. And that is something that is really at the heart of this. So I'm going to pitch this idea to Tim Draper, and yeah, I don't know. We'll see how that goes. I was really shocked to be selected. I kind of just came up with this idea and threw it together and made it work. And I still think it has a lot of merit. I wasn't really focused on building that because I see it as much more of a long-term vision, and quite frankly, right now I don't have the financial stability to really look long-term, and that's one of the things that I've been kind of looking into other opportunities that can help provide more of a financial stability while I explore some of these ideas more on the side, because I tried to do everything with no budget, and it was not great. Turns out when I'm under financial strain, I don't learn nearly as effectively. I have a heart, like, it really throws the ADHD into overdrive, and just a lot of bad things happen. So yeah, so I'm looking to kind of do things at a slower pace, more financial stability. But let's see how this goes, because it's been a fun journey. At this point, like, if I get selected to be on Meet the Drapers, awesome. But I don't need to be. And, I have so many opportunities right now in the pipeline that something's going to work out just fine. And I feel like I've achieved this higher level of freedom by going through all of this. It's been an incredible personal journey. It's been a lot of painful growth, but I think a lot of personal growth is painful, just by the nature of it, because it's not easy to overcome some of your challenges. And part of that is figuring out what your challenges are. And when I left the corporate environment, I didn't realize the extent of my challenges. I thought it was, first of all, just ADHD. I mean, I had kind of maybe an idea that autism was part of that. But one of the things that I missed was how much I had come to rely on corporate structure, for example. A lot of that stuff just being taken care of for me. And then all of a sudden, that was like I had come to figure out how to be extremely productive in that environment, to the point where, honestly, I could get most of my work done in like 2 to 3 hours a day. Ends up like I had really figured out how to just absolutely rely on that. And when that was taken away, I had no idea what I was doing. There were a lot of days that just shit couldn't get done because I couldn't get my brain to do anything. So that's been it's been a journey. There's been a lot of personal growth. I've realized that I just can't. I can't do everything all at once, and I don't need to do everything. Just because I can learn how to do everything eventually doesn't mean I need to do everything, and I don't need to do everything now. And there's time. I still have a lot of time. At least I should. I mean, I'm going to, kind of live every day. But I need to work on living more, and maybe working just a bit less, which is, I do enjoy all of this. I enjoy the kind of hectic, crazy, doing a million different things. But I want to do it in a way that is more sustainable because, I need to. And I'm going to share, to kind of finish up here, I want to share a secret that I kind of came up with. I don't know, I came up with it. I uncovered it. It's something that helps me, maybe to help you. But, one of the things that I really struggled with when I decided, I was like, okay, well, I can be a content creator if nothing else. I can create all this stuff. And I didn't really know how to make it for other people. And when I tried to craft content specifically for other people, I kept running into blocks, and I couldn't produce on a regular basis until I realized that the secret to creating content was to not make it for anyone else. I needed to start making content for me, and then I could share the content that I made for me with the world, and hopefully it would help somebody. And it's a slight shift, but it's what's making this video possible. It's what's making everything possible for me. I no longer write to get thousands of views, which I wasn't getting anyway. And I no longer try to create TikTok videos to go viral and get attention to various things that I'm doing. Because that doesn't work for me. That's not how I want to work. That's not, I just don't enjoy that. I want to do things that I really enjoy, and to do that, I just need to understand that I'm doing it for me. Like I'm reflecting on this stuff for me. And then I'm just going to happen to post it to YouTube to see if it helps anybody else. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And probably no one's going to listen to it because I'm at 40 minutes now. This is ridiculous. But yeah, it's helping me process everything. It has been a hell of a year. So many ups and downs. And I feel like the rest of my life is kind of just getting started here. So, I will see you again next week when I decide to reflect on the coming very, very busy week that I've got ahead of me. And hopefully I'll have more to say on that. So, thanks for watching.